All right, listen closely. David Schwartz just dropped a statement about XRP's price that is shaking the entire crypto space right now. And if you actually dig into what he's really communicating, you're going to see that this fundamentally shifts the narrative, people. Now, the majority of folks assume that whenever a crypto executive starts talking about price, they're either talking up their own holdings or giving you some safe corporate non-answer. The kind of thing you'd expect to hear from a communications team, what I like to call the HR version of the truth. But here's the connection that absolutely nobody is making. Schwartz laid out almost the identical argument just 3 weeks before XRP skyrocketed during the December 2017 surge. And I've got the proof to back it up, so buckle up, turn the volume way up, and stay locked in. As always, smash that like button and hit subscribe on the channel. And on top of all that, we've got real institutional infrastructure that just went live, which makes everything Schwartz is saying right now hit on a completely different level. Here's what we're breaking down today. The mathematical framework Schwartz just laid out that completely dismantles every argument the bears are making. The uncanny similarity between his 2017 comments and what's unfolding right now. The brand new Treasury platform that just launched, reportedly connecting Ripple's rails to thousands of corporate banking relationships. The counterintuitive reason why a cheaper XRP can actually become more costly to use at scale. And look, I've been in this space for close to a decade now. I've been tracking Schwartz's public statements for years, lining them up against actual price movements and real development milestones. What's happening at this exact moment? It's a pattern I've recognized before. Let's break it down. So let's kick things off with the 2017 moment that actually materialized. December 2017, XRP made an absolutely explosive move to the upside. But before that entire rally kicked off, Schwartz put out a statement that seemed completely out of left field if you weren't paying attention to the underlying mechanics. He said, "It cannot be dirt cheap." And then he followed it up with an explanation that, once again, most people completely overlooked. He basically laid it out like this. If you're trying to move $1 million, the total dollar amount you're moving doesn't magically shift based on how much a single XRP is worth. If one XRP equals $1, you need 1 million of them to move 1 million. If one XRP equals $1 million, you only need one. But either way, the total value being transferred stays exactly the same. Now, when people heard that, a huge chunk of the community jumped straight to the conclusion that he was dropping a hint about where the price was headed. Like he was basically telling everyone, XRP has to be expensive. That's not what was actually happening. What he was really explaining was something far more significant. Utility and real liquidity create structural constraints on how an asset functions. Not moon math, not hopium, structural realities. The actual hidden message was this. If XRP genuinely becomes the backbone of cross-border settlement at a global scale, it requires sufficient depth and efficiency in the trading markets where it operates, and price directly interacts with that reality. Not because a bigger number is some kind of magic spell, but because the way markets actually function, the depth of order books, the spread between buy and sell, and how much slippage you get when you execute, all of that matters enormously. Here's the part that most retail participants genuinely struggle to wrap their heads around. When institutional-size capital moves through markets, the cost isn't just the transaction fee sitting at the bottom of the screen. The real cost is the market impact of that trade. The cost is the widening spreads. The cost is the slippage you eat when you're pushing through a massive order. The cost is the volatility that gets introduced during execution. And Schwartz's entire argument boiled down to this. If XRP ends up being utilized as a bridge for large-scale settlement and the price stays too low, the sheer quantity of units you'd need to move that value becomes absurd. And that kind of volume puts enormous pressure on available liquidity, especially when the market hasn't matured enough to support it yet. Then here's where it gets really interesting. Roughly 3 weeks after he laid that out, XRP exploded from around 25 cents all the way up to about $3.50. Was it a straight coincidence? Possibly. But the real takeaway here isn't that Schwartz somehow called the exact price move in advance. The deeper point is this. When Schwartz opens his mouth about how price actually works in the context of XRP, he's not guessing or speculating for fun. He's walking through probability frameworks and the hard logic of how markets behave. When he puts out a statement about price mechanics, he's basically describing what the system requires in order to actually function at the scale it was designed for. How rational participants will act, how liquidity will respond, how the market as a whole adjusts. And right now he's making the exact same kind of arguments again, which brings us to the big one. This is where it gets really spicy because Schwartz just applied game theory in a way that completely torches the bear thesis, and most people watching didn't even catch what he was doing. And before we keep going, if you haven't smashed that thumbs up yet, do it right now. It genuinely helps this video reach more people. Alright, so here's exactly what Schwartz laid out. Pay attention to every word. He explained that if a significant number of rational, informed people genuinely believed there was even a 10% chance that XRP reaches $100 within the next few years, those people absolutely would not be dumping their bags right now, and they definitely wouldn't be selling at $10 either. Why not? Because the second enough rational actors share that conviction, they'd be aggressively buying up every available XRP below their personal expected value threshold until the market price catches up and reflects that shared belief. This is the critical part. He was not saying XRP is going to $100. What he was saying is something way more precise. If the market collectively and genuinely believed there was a real, meaningful probability of that outcome, the price would already be adjusting to reflect that belief. That's an expected value calculation in its purest form. Here's the math broken down as simply as possible. A 10% probability of a $100 outcome gives you an expected value of $10. And that's if you assume the other 90% scenario means XRP goes to absolutely zero. So in that framework, if enough rational participants truly held that belief with conviction, supply sitting well below $10 would get absorbed fast. Because rational buyers don't willingly sell something for $2 when their own math tells them it's worth $10 in expected value terms. Then Schwartz flipped the entire logic around. He pointed out that if XRP is currently trading far below that $10 expected value number, that tells you something important. It tells you that the majority of actual market participants, the ones with real capital behind their opinions, do not genuinely believe that outcome strongly enough to stake real money on it. In plain, everyday language, he's calling out the gap between people who talk big online and people who actually put their dollars where their mouth is. He's not bearish here. He's not out here pumping anyone's bags either. He's diagnosing the market. He's essentially saying that crypto prices tend to be far more rational than people give them credit for most of the time. And the biggest explosive rallies, the ones that completely catch people off guard, typically get triggered by unpredictable external catalysts. New information hitting the market, massive adoption announcements, regulatory shifts that change the game, infrastructure going fully live, major liquidity events landing. Translation for you. When XRP makes its next massive move, it almost certainly isn't going to be because 1,000 people on Twitter decided it was time. It's going to be because something real changes the way rational participants calculate the probability of what XRP can actually accomplish at scale. And that leads us directly into the next piece of this puzzle, because there are serious people claiming that exact kind of change is happening right now. If you want a real structured plan instead of just guessing at the market every single day, make sure you check out the 100X Club membership. It includes the XRP Millionaire Blueprint, exclusive weekly alerts on high potential opportunities, and a step-by-step training framework to help you build real wealth with smart risk management and actual strategy behind every move. It's in the pinned comment. Go grab it. All right, back to business. Because while everyone is going back and forth on Twitter, Reddit, TikTok, and Instagram arguing about price targets, Ripple just made a move that completely reframes the entire conversation. And this one is not alleged or rumored. This is confirmed and public. Here's what actually happened. On January 27th of this year, Ripple officially launched Ripple Treasury, powered by G Treasury. This came directly off the back of Ripple's $1 billion acquisition of G Treasury back in October 2025. And G Treasury is not some small startup. This is a platform with over 4 decades of enterprise treasury experience, trusted by over 1,000 corporate customers across 160 countries, processing roughly $12.5 trillion in payment volume. Now here's the part that really matters. The way this platform is set up, it treats digital asset platforms the exact same way traditional banks are treated inside enterprise treasury systems. Direct API integrations, real-time balance visibility, transaction tracking, the whole 9 yards, all flowing into the same dashboards that CFOs and treasurers have been using for years to manage cash, debt, and short-term investments. That is not a pilot program. That is not a sandbox experiment. That is enterprise-grade, production-ready treasury infrastructure. And on top of that, the platform connects users directly to overnight repo markets and tokenized money market funds. And yes, that includes BlackRock's BUIDle fund. So corporations can actually earn yield on their idle cash around the clock, not just during normal banking hours. Now, the narrative circulating online about connecting XRP to 13,000 banks, let's add some precision to that. The phrase connected to 13,000 banks can mean a lot of different things depending on how you define it. It could mean directly integrated with, it could mean accessible through, it could mean compatible within a provider network. Those are not all the same thing, but here's the high-level point that matters regardless of how you slice the terminology. Treasury infrastructure is where the serious institutional money lives and breathes. This is not a meme. This is not a proof of concept sitting in some lab somewhere. Treasury is where chief financial officers manage actual cash positions, handle liquidity planning, manage foreign exchange exposure, and execute settlement processes that move enormous value every single day. So when Ripple's blockchain rails are being positioned inside treasury-grade operational workflows, that is categorically fundamentally different from anything that happens in the retail speculation world. Treasury tools are not designed for hype cycles. They're built for operational stability and risk management on a massive scale. Institutions do not plug new infrastructure into their treasury plumbing on a whim, because once it's in there, it's touching real money, real accounting, real compliance requirements, and real operational uptime expectations. So circle back to what Schwartz was talking about. Rational price discovery driven by genuine utility and unpredictable external changes. A treasury-grade deployment going live is exactly the type of catalyst that can shift the probability equation for the entire market. Not because every bank is buying XRP first thing tomorrow morning, but because the presence of real infrastructure changes the landscape of what's actually possible. And when what's possible changes, markets start repricing accordingly. And that brings us directly into the final and frankly most mind-bending piece of Schwartz's framework. One of the most misunderstood things he has ever said. Why a higher XRP price can actually make payments cheaper. I know, it sounds completely backwards. It fries people's brains every single time. But stay with me because this is where the real logic lives. Schwartz basically pointed out that when an asset is trading too cheaply, using it to facilitate large-scale payments becomes impractical. And not for the reason you might initially think. It's not because the total value being moved changes. It's because the quantity of units you need becomes so massive that it starts interacting with market liquidity in ways that actually increase your real cost. Let's break this down with actual numbers. If XRP is sitting at $1 and you need to move $10 million worth of value, you need 10 million individual XRP. If XRP is at $100 and you're moving the same 10 million, you only need 100,000 XRP. Same exact total value being transferred. Completely different unit volumes. Now here's where it actually starts to matter. Markets have depth. They're not infinite pools of liquidity. Liquidity providers set their spreads based on order flow. When you slam a massive quantity of units into the market all at once, whether you're buying or selling, you create slippage. Wider spreads open up, price impact becomes real, execution risk increases, your total effective cost of that transaction goes way above whatever the simple ledger fee says. So the actual cost of moving value isn't just the fee you see on the screen. It's also the cost of converting and executing that volume in live real-world markets. In that framework, a higher unit price actually reduces how many units you need to move the same value. And if liquidity scales alongside that higher valuation, which it historically tends to do in maturing markets, then your market impact shrinks, your effective cost goes down, and large-scale settlement becomes dramatically more efficient. This is what I call the liquidity paradox. A higher unit price supports more efficient movement of large value. A lower unit price demands massive unit flows that stress the depth of the market. And for institutional flows, where the settlement sizes are in the hundreds of millions or billions, that distinction is absolutely critical. Now, and this is the nuance that the hype crowd loves to skip right past. This dynamic only actually helps if liquidity is genuinely deep. A sky-high price tag by itself doesn't automatically guarantee low slippage. You need real market structure behind it. But here's the thing, in a market that's actually maturing, higher valuations tend to come hand in hand with deeper liquidity, broader participation from more market makers, and far more stable execution overall. It's not a coincidence. It's how financial markets develop over time. So let's bring all the pieces together now. Schwartz's probability framework tells us that current prices reflect what the collective market actually believes, not what people are shouting on social media. The idea of unpredictable external catalysts tells us that the biggest moves come from things nobody saw coming. Real infrastructure deployment and Ripple Treasury going live is a perfect example of that, is exactly the kind of external change that reshapes how rational participants think about probability. And the liquidity paradox tells us that for institutional scale settlement, a low unit price can paradoxically increase your real-world costs, while a higher valuation in a deep, mature market can actually reduce effective costs and make the whole system run better. And here's where the 2017 parallel actually becomes relevant, not because it's some crystal ball that predicts the future, but because it shows you the recurring pattern. Schwartz explains a mechanical reality that most of the market completely ignores. Then a real-world catalyst arrives that shifts the probability calculation. Then the market reprices. And then everyone acts like it was obvious the entire time. Now let's layer in something else that's been happening in the background while everyone is staring at price charts. Ripple has been absolutely crushing it on the regulatory front, and this is the kind of infrastructure building that happens before the big moves become visible to the average person. In January of this year, Ripple secured an electronic money institution license and a full crypto asset registration from the UK's Financial Conduct Authority. That's not ceremonial. That allows Ripple to offer regulated, licensed cross-border payment services directly to banks and financial institutions in one of the world's most important financial centers. Then just days later, they received conditional approval from the OCC in the United States for a national banking license. Think about what that means for a second. A conditional national banking license in America that places Ripple's RLUSD stablecoin directly under OCC oversight and dramatically increases the trust and credibility of everything Ripple is building. And it doesn't stop there. Ripple also secured approval in Luxembourg, which opens the door across the broader European financial system. They've got approvals in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, and they now hold over 75 licenses globally. And remember, all of this is layering directly on top of the 3 massive acquisitions Ripple completed in 2025. Hidden Road for $1.25 billion, giving them a full prime brokerage operation. Rail for $200 million, building out their stablecoin payment infrastructure. And G Treasury for $1 billion, which is now live and operational as Ripple Treasury. We're talking about roughly $2.5 billion deployed in a single year to build out an institutional financial infrastructure stack. That is not speculation, that is commitment at the highest level. So let's bring it all the way home now. Schwartz just handed us a framework. The current price of XRP tells us exactly what the market collectively believes about the probability of a massive move happening in the near term. But he also told us the biggest rallies don't come from telegraphed certainties. They come from unpredictable external shifts. And Ripple Treasury going live, a conditional national banking license landing in the US, EMI approval in the UK, regulatory clearance across dozens of jurisdictions. That entire category of development is precisely what can alter the probability calculation for rational market participants. Then you stack the counterintuitive math on top. For institutional settlement at real scale, a low unit price genuinely increases your effective transaction costs when you account for unit volume and market slippage. And a higher valuation in a mature, liquid market can genuinely reduce those effective costs and make the infrastructure run the way it was designed to run. So no, none of this is about blind price predictions or baseless moon math. It's about mechanics. It's about how rational actors actually behave. It's about how expected value reprices entire markets. And it's about how infrastructure going live can fundamentally shift those beliefs. We are not on the moon yet. Nobody is claiming that. But the question that actually matters is a simple one. When the probability assessment changes for real, and there are serious signs it's starting to, are you positioned before the market reprices or after? That's the only question that matters. If you want the full strategy and framework to position yourself properly through all of this, the 100X Club has you covered. The XRP Millionaire Blueprint, exclusive weekly alerts on high potential opportunities, and the tools to actually build wealth with a real plan behind it. It's in the pinned comment. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you all in the next one.